Far away from Earth, beyond the shining dust of dying stars, there was silence so deep it almost felt alive. Inside that dark space, a huge alien fleet moved slowly, like a mountain range floating through the void. Their ships were made of dark metal that shimmered faintly, and each one was large enough to swallow a city. This was the Dreven Dominion, the most feared power in their part of the galaxy. They had conquered world after world, leaving behind quiet planets and broken skies. Their leader, a tall, gray-skinned being with eyes that glowed faintly blue, stood at the window of the main ship. He had seen countless battles, destroyed countless enemies. To him, war was routine. His people didn't fight for survival anymore. They fought because they could. Then something strange happened. A small signal appeared on their scanners. It was weak, almost invisible, coming from a distant system near a yellow star. The crew thought it was nothing. Static, maybe, a natural pulse from some dead rock. But when they amplified it, they heard something that none of them expected. An artificial transmission, filled with strange words and soft, rhythmic sounds. It was a human signal. The Dreven had heard rumors about Earth, a small blue world full of life but technologically primitive. They were supposed to be centuries behind in weapons and travel. No threat at all. Still, the commander was curious. He ordered the fleet to change course toward the source of the signal. Days later, as they approached the edge of the solar system, their scanners picked up something even stranger. A single human ship was moving toward them. One ship, just one. The crew laughed. To them, it was absurd. An entire alien fleet, powerful enough to crush a planet, and the humans had sent only one small ship. It was like watching an insect fly straight toward a storm. Some said it was a mistake. Others believed it was a surrender attempt. The commander didn't laugh. He had seen too much in his long life to underestimate anything. He looked closely at the readings. The ship wasn't large, barely the size of one of their smaller vessels. It had no heavy weapons, no escort, no shields. It was alone in the vast emptiness. "Why are the humans only one ship against us?" he murmured, his voice low but sharp enough for the others to hear. No one had an answer. They continued scanning, but the results only deepened their confusion. The human ship didn't seem to be preparing for battle. There was no sign of energy charging, no distress signals, no communication requests. It just kept coming, slow and steady, as if it had all the time in the universe. Hours passed. The Dreven ships formed a massive wall of metal and light in front of the little craft. From the outside, it must have looked hopeless. The alien fleet stretched across space like a dark horizon, their engines glowing like suns. In the middle of that vast power, the human ship looked like a spark waiting to be blown out. Inside the command room, tension built. The crew began whispering among themselves. Some wanted to destroy it immediately, just to prove their dominance. Others wanted to capture it and study it. The commander silenced them all with a single gesture. "Wait," he said. "Let's see what they do." As the distance closed, the human ship sent no signal. It just kept its quiet course forward. The commander's curiosity grew into something he hadn't felt in centuries: unease. There was something deliberate in that silence, something unnervingly calm. He ordered the visual scanners to zoom in. On the main screen, the ship appeared clearer now. It was old by their standards, metallic gray, patched and worn. Yet it moved with precision, almost grace. Its engines flickered like a heartbeat, steady and alive. There were markings on the side, symbols of Earth, small flags, and faded words. To the Dreven, they meant nothing. To the humans, they probably meant everything. The commander stared at the ship and felt a strange thought forming in his mind. These humans weren't just approaching for surrender. They had come with purpose. That idea unsettled him more than any weapon could. He asked his second officer, "Do they carry life forms?" The scans flickered. Yes, one. Just one life form aboard. The commander turned away from the screen and walked toward the window. His reflection stared back at him, cold eyes, unreadable face. "One ship, one person," he said quietly. "They must know they cannot win." The second officer hesitated. "Maybe they don't intend to fight." That idea spread through the room like a quiet spark. If they weren't coming to fight, then what were they doing? No one in the Dominion could imagine approaching an enemy with nothing but peace in mind. To them, peace was weakness. Mercy was foolishness. Still, the human ship kept coming. Outside, space was endless and silent. The stars glowed softly in the distance, ancient and indifferent. Between those stars, One fragile vessel faced an armada that had crushed hundreds of civilizations, yet there was no fear in its movements, no sign of panic. The commander ordered all weapons to standby mode, ready but not active. He didn't know why, but something inside told him not to fire first. He had destroyed thousands of ships before, yet this one, this small, brave thing, felt different. When the ship reached communication range, everyone held their breath. They waited for the humans to speak, to beg, to explain, but the speakers remained silent. Only static filled the air. The commander finally gave the order to open a wide broadcast channel. "Human vessel," he said, his voice echoing through the control room. "You are in violation of Dominion space. State your purpose." There was no response. "Human vessel," he repeated, this time more firmly. "Identify yourself or you will be destroyed." Still nothing. Just the soft hum of their own engines and the crackle of the void. Minutes passed. Then suddenly the human ship flickered with a faint blue light. The crew leaned forward, expecting a weapon charge or some desperate move. Instead, a simple voice broke through the static. It was calm, quiet, human. "We are not here to fight." The room froze. The words hung in the air like fragile glass. The commander frowned. He hadn't expected that. "Then why are you here?" he asked. The answer came slowly, almost like a whisper. "To talk." The crew stared at each other, unsure if they had heard correctly. Talk to an armada? To the most dangerous force in the galaxy? It made no sense. The commander's voice lowered. "Talking about what?" The voice replied, steady and unwavering. "About peace." No one spoke after that. The commander turned toward the window again, watching the little ship floating in front of his enormous fleet. For the first time in a long while, he felt something stirred deep inside him. Curiosity mixed with something softer, something he didn't want to name. He didn't destroy the human ship that day. He could have done it in a heartbeat, but something about their courage stopped him. There was no logic in what the humans had done, no tactical sense, yet there was meaning, something he could feel but couldn't explain. As the commander stood in silence, watching that small ship glow faintly in the distance, his question returned to him, louder this time. Why are the humans only one ship against us? He didn't have the answer yet. But in his heart, he felt that whatever the reason was, it would change everything. The fleet remained still, facing the lone vessel, the universe holding its breath between them. Somewhere inside that tiny ship, one human waited for a response, not with fear but with hope. And in that quiet moment, the greatest armada in the galaxy didn't feel powerful at all. It felt uncertain. The war machine that had silenced worlds found itself listening, to a single voice, to a fragile message, to the possibility that maybe strength wasn't always measured in weapons. The first meeting between humanity and the Dominion didn't begin with explosions or threats. It began with a question and the strange, unshakable courage of one person who believed that peace was still worth trying for, even in the coldest corners of space. The human ship moved slowly through the vast dark sea of space, its surface worn and scarred from long travel. Compared to the massive Dreven fleet surrounding it, the human vessel looked fragile, tiny, almost invisible against the shadow of those giant warships. Yet it did not turn back. It moved with a kind of peace that made even the alien soldiers uneasy. Inside the command center of the Dreven flagship, silence filled the room. Every officer watched the small dot on the screen, expecting at any moment that it might reveal its true purpose. But nothing happened. No weapons, no sudden movements, no threat at all. The little ship just floated there, steady and calm. The commander stood with his hands behind his back, staring at the holographic display. He could hear the low hum of the engines and the faint clicks of scanners updating every few seconds. His people were trained to read data, analyze patterns, and react fast. Yet this time, the data gave them nothing. No explanation, no logic. One of the younger officers finally spoke, breaking the silence. "Maybe it's a distraction," he said carefully. "Maybe there are more human ships hiding behind a planet or cloaked nearby." The commander glanced at him but didn't answer. He had already checked that possibility himself. The scans showed no sign of other ships. There was only this one. Another officer suggested that the humans might be surrendering. But if that were true, why hadn't they raised any signal of distress or communication? Why send just one ship across the endless darkness if the goal was to give up? The commander's expression didn't change, but his mind was busy. His kind believed that fear ruled all living things. To them, fear was a tool and control was survival. Yet this human ship seemed to have no fear at all. It had come alone into the heart of danger, like a candle walking into a storm. He leaned closer to the main screen and whispered to himself, "What do they want?" The human ship continued forward, drifting slowly toward the center of the alien formation. All around it, the Drevon ships adjusted their positions. Hundreds of metallic giants glowing with pale blue light aimed their weapons at the small vessel. Any one of them could destroy it in a heartbeat. Still, the commander didn't give the order. Something deep inside him said, "Wait." He ordered a closer visual scan. The image on the main display sharpened until every line and mark on the human ship became clear. Its metal hull was scratched, dented, and covered in patches where it had clearly been repaired many times. It wasn't a warship, it was more like an exploration vessel. There were faded human symbols near the front. A small flag painted by hand. Letters that had almost disappeared under space dust. It looked old but alive. "Commander," said the scanning officer, "we confirm there's only one life form aboard." That information made the entire room go quiet again. "One person." "Just one," the commander frowned. "One ship. One person, traveling alone across systems to face us." He paused. "They know who we are, don't they?" "Yes," the officer replied softly. "The transmission logs show they must have received our signals before we intercepted theirs." The commander nodded slowly. "Then this human knows they are walking into certain death." He turned back toward the window, where the reflection of his cold eyes met the distant image of the human ship. He had seen bravery before, bravery fueled by desperation or rage. But this was something different. It wasn't wild or angry. It was calm. It was steady. The fleet waited for orders. The commander's crew grew restless. The air felt heavy with tension. Many wanted to end this strange meeting before it even began. Some whispered that the human ship might be carrying a hidden bomb. Others believed it was a last act of madness from a dying species. But the commander didn't believe that. He had fought for hundreds of years, and he knew what fear looked like. This wasn't fear. He finally gave a soft command. "Prepare a signal. Open visual communication." The crew obeyed instantly. Screens flickered, connections were made, and a moment later the human's image appeared on their main display. It was indeed one person, a human dressed in a worn uniform, eyes tired but not afraid. The lighting was dim, the ship clearly old and damaged. Yet there was something powerful in the human's expression, a quiet strength that couldn't be measured by machines. The commander studied the face carefully. Then he spoke, his deep voice echoing through the control room. "Human, you have entered the territory of the Drevon Dominion. You stand before an armada capable of destroying your entire planet. Why are you here alone?" The human didn't look away. "Because I needed to be." That answer made the commander pause. It wasn't arrogance and it wasn't madness. It sounded honest. "You have no army," said the commander. "No defense. You bring no threat. Why approach us?" "To speak," the human replied. "Speak of what?" "Of peace." Those two simple words made the room stir. Some of the alien officers exchanged quick, nervous glances. The word peace was rarely spoken in their language. It sounded strange, soft, like something from an ancient dream. The commander frowned. "You came here alone, through war zones, through the edge of the void, just to speak of peace?" Yes, for a moment no one spoke. The commander stared into the screen, trying to understand. This human didn't tremble, didn't plead, didn't seem to care about living or dying, only about being heard. He turned away and muttered quietly, "They must be desperate." Still, something in his chest felt heavy. He could have ended it right there with a single order. The fleet was ready, weapons charged, targeting systems locked. But he didn't give the command. Instead, he studied the human one last time. The longer he looked, the less the human seemed like an enemy. There was no hate in that face, only conviction. After a long silence, the commander spoke again, softer now. "Why should I listen to you?" The human answered calmly. "Because the strongest ones are those who choose not to destroy what they can. You have power. You can take lives, worlds, anything you want. But if you listen, maybe you'll see that strength can mean something else." The commander's hands tightened behind his back. Those words cut deeper than he wanted to admit. His people had been at war for so long that they no longer remembered a time before it. He had never met anyone who dared to speak to him that way, especially not a creature from a world so small. so weak compared to theirs. He turned to his officers and said quietly, "Hold your fire." "Let them speak," gasps filled the room. No one had expected that order. The commander ignored their confusion and focused on the screen again. The human sat there in silence, waiting, not begging, not boasting. The commander asked one final question, the one that had haunted him since the moment they first saw that ship. "Tell me, human, why are you only one ship against us?" The human smiled faintly. "Because one voice can still be heard even when surrounded by an army." The words hung in the air long after the signal ended. The commander didn't respond. He simply stared out the window again, watching the little ship drifting in the middle of his fleet. Around him, his soldiers waited, nervous and confused, their fingers ready over the controls. Yet the commander gave no order to destroy. He couldn't explain it, but something deep inside him didn't want to end that fragile spark of courage. Maybe it reminded him of what his people had once been, long before conquest became their only goal. As the human ship floated there, silent and unmoving, the commander realized he was no longer angry. He was curious. The small vessel seemed to carry something more powerful than any weapon, something invisible, something that refused to break. The commander didn't know it yet, but that single meeting was about to change the course of everything he believed in. The Dreven fleet stayed in formation, engines rumbling softly in the darkness. Between them and the lone human ship stretched the infinite stillness of space, a silence filled not with fear, but with the beginning of understanding. The question still echoed in the commander's mind as the stars shimmered outside the window. Why are the humans only one ship against us? And though he didn't have the answer yet, he could feel it forming slowly, like dawn rising over a forgotten world. The human ship floated silently in front of the massive alien fleet, surrounded by thousands of glowing warships that could destroy a planet in seconds. Inside the Dreven flagship, no one spoke for a long time. Every eye was fixed on the single, small ship drifting calmly in the middle of their formation. It was quiet, unarmed, and fragile, but it refused to back away. The commander stood in front of the viewing glass, his reflection shining faintly against the endless black of space. He was still trying to understand why the humans would send only one ship against them. Was it arrogance? Desperation? Or something deeper? The more he thought about it, the more unsettled he felt. Then suddenly the human vessel came alive. A signal pulsed out from it, soft, rhythmic waves of sound. The crew immediately scanned it for weapons or hidden traps, but there was none. It was just a transmission. "Open the channel," the commander ordered quietly. The communication link flickered on. Static filled the speakers, followed by a faint voice, a human voice. It was calm, clear, and steady, even though the entire fleet could hear it. "We don't come to fight," the voice said. "We come to talk." Those few words hit harder than any weapon could. The crew exchanged confused glances. Some scoffed. Others whispered among themselves. Talk? With the Dominion? The idea was absurd. For centuries, no one had ever dared to talk to the Dreven. They either submitted or were wiped out. The commander narrowed his eyes, studying the small ship. The voice continued, this time slower and gentler. "We know who you are. We know what you have done across the stars. You are powerful. You have won many battles. You have taken what you wanted because no one could stop you." The commander said nothing. His jaw tightened slightly. The human went on. "But have you ever wondered why we keep surviving? Every time something stronger tries to destroy us, we rise again. We rebuild. We remember. We keep moving forward." The command room fell silent. For the first time, someone was speaking to them not with fear, but with a strange kind of calmness, like someone telling a story rather than facing death. The commander leaned closer to the speaker. "You say you came to talk, then talk. What is it you want to say?" The human voice didn't hesitate. "We want to understand why you believe strength only comes from fear. We want to show you that there is another kind of strength, one you might have forgotten." The commander frowned. "Forgotten?" "Yes," the voice replied. "The kind that comes from choosing to protect instead of destroy." For a moment, the commander didn't respond. The crew waited, afraid to breathe too loudly. The Dreven were a race that had built their empire on control and power. They believed mercy was weakness and fear kept order. Yet this small human ship, carrying only one person, dared to challenge that idea. The human voice continued, speaking with quiet emotion. Our world is small. We don't have great weapons like yours. We have lost many wars, made many mistakes, but every time we fall, we rise again, because there is something inside us that refuses to give up, something that keeps us human." The commander stared at the flickering screen. "And what do you think that is?" he asked softly. "Hope," the voice said simply. "Even when everything is falling apart, we keep hoping. It's the only thing that has kept us alive." The word hope sounded strange in the commander's mind. He hadn't heard it spoken in his language for centuries. It felt almost mythical. His people had given up hope long ago, replacing it with control, discipline, and war. The human's voice grew stronger now, more passionate. "You can destroy our ship right now if you want. You have enough power to erase us in less than a second. But what will that prove? That you're stronger? You already know that. What if you did something different this time? What if you listened?" The commander didn't know how to respond. His entire life had been built around the idea that power meant victory. Yet something about this human's courage, their calmness in the face of death, was unsettling. There was no trembling in their voice, no sign of fear. "Only belief," one of the younger officers whispered. "Commander, this must be a trick. They are trying to distract us." The commander shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "They believe every word they say." The alien fleet remained still. The stars beyond twinkled faintly, distant and ancient, as if watching the strange encounter unfold. Then, without warning, the human ship broadcast something new. The sound of music filled the room. It wasn't harsh or mechanical, it was soft, emotional, and alive. It rose and fell gently like waves touching the shore. None of the Dreven had ever heard anything like it. The sound carried a feeling that words could not describe. "What is that?" an officer asked quietly. The commander didn't answer. He just listened. The music continued for a while, flowing through the vast ship like a heartbeat. Then the human voice returned. "This is part of who we are. When we face darkness, we sing. When we are afraid, we reach for one another. When we have nothing left, we still create. Maybe that's what you don't understand yet. Power is not about how much you can destroy, it's about how much you can protect." The command room was silent again. The commander could feel his crew shifting uncomfortably. For the first time in many years, they were hearing words that weren't filled with threats or commands, words that carried warmth instead of coldness. The commander finally spoke. His voice was quieter now, almost thoughtful. "You are brave, human. Foolish maybe, but brave. Do you really believe your words can change anything?" "Yes," the human said. "Because they already have. You're listening." That reply struck him deeply. He didn't show it, but inside something cracked. A small buried part of him that remembered when his people weren't conquerors but explorers. When they too sought to understand, not just to rule. He turned away from the screen for a moment and looked out into the endless dark. His reflection in the glass looked older, tired, less certain than before. The silence around him wasn't the silence of victory. It was the silence of confusion, of awakening. He faced the screen again. "You speak of peace, human. Yet peace is only possible when both sides agree. What if my people don't want it? Then I'll keep speaking," the human replied softly. "Even if no one listens. Because peace always begins with one voice." The commander exhaled slowly. He had no words for that. His entire fleet, the pride of his civilization, was standing still before a single human ship, and for the first time they didn't know what to do. He looked at the glowing dots representing his warships and said quietly to himself, "Why are the humans only one ship against us?" Now he was beginning to understand that maybe the humans didn't need more. Maybe one voice, one act of courage, one message of hope could be stronger than 1,000 cannons. The human's message ended, but its echo stayed in the room. No one dared to break the silence. The commander turned back to the viewing glass and watched the small ship shining faintly against the sea of stars. It looked fragile, yet it felt indestructible. That night, or what counted as night in space, the commander couldn't sleep. He kept hearing the human's words in his mind. Hope, peace, strength without destruction. They were simple ideas, but they carried a power his world had forgotten long ago. He didn't know what would happen next. He didn't know if the Dominion would listen or destroy the human ship at sunrise. But for the first time he found himself hesitating, not out of fear but out of respect. The human had done something no army ever had. They had made the most powerful fleet in the galaxy stop and think. And somewhere deep inside, the commander realized that maybe that was what true strength really meant. The Dreven fleet stayed silent for a long time after the human's voice faded away. Inside the giant flagship, the crew waited nervously for their commander's next move. Every ship in the armada had its weapons aimed at the small human vessel, ready to strike at a single order. Yet that order never came. The commander stood in front of the main window, his hands clasped behind his back, staring at the lone ship floating among the stars. His mind was full of thoughts that refused to settle. He could destroy the human craft in a second. It would be easy, too easy. But something about that voice, that message of peace, kept echoing in his mind like a distant song he couldn't forget. His second officer finally broke the silence. "Commander, what are your orders?" "Shall we proceed with the strike?" The commander turned slightly, his eyes narrowing. "Do you believe they are dangerous?" The officer hesitated. "No, Commander. Their ship has no weapons, but they defy us simply by being here. Their message could be seen as disrespect." The commander looked back at the small human vessel and said quietly, "Or it could be something else." The others didn't understand. To them, strength meant power, and power meant control. They had ruled through fear for centuries. No one had ever dared to face them without weapons, without armies. Yet these humans had come alone, with words instead of war. The commander took a deep breath. "Let's test them," he said finally. The crew looked confused. "Test them, Commander?" "Yes," he replied. "If they are truly what they claim to be, peaceful, brave, and honest, then let's see how far that courage goes." He turned to his navigation officer. "Send 3 of our fighter ships to circle them. Make it look like an attack formation. No weapons fire, just enough to make them feel the pressure." The crew followed the order immediately. 3 sleek Dreven fighters broke away from the formation and began to circle the tiny human ship. Their movements were precise, silent, and menacing. From a distance, it looked like a predator playing with its prey. Inside the command room, everyone watched closely. The human ship didn't move. It didn't raise shields. It didn't send out any defensive signals. It just stayed still, as calm as before. The commander frowned. "Strange," he muttered. "Most beings would panic by now." The human ship finally sent out a short transmission. The voice that came through was steady, almost gentle. "We know what you're doing. You can circle us 1,000 times, but we didn't come to run or hide. We came to speak." That reply made several of the alien officers shift uncomfortably. No one had ever spoken to them that way. The human didn't sound angry or afraid, just certain. The commander watched as the small ship continued to drift. He waited for it to make a move, to show weakness, but it didn't. He leaned closer to the communication console and said, "You stand before the most powerful fleet in this part of the galaxy. Your people are fragile. Your ship is weak. Don't you understand what will happen if I decide to attack?" There was a short pause. Then the human replied softly, "Yes, I know. You can destroy our ship, but you can't destroy what we stand for." The command room fell silent again. Those words carried more weight than any weapon. Even the commander's hands tightened behind his back. He didn't show emotion, but deep inside he felt something shift, something he hadn't felt in years. He turned to his crew. "Increase the pressure. Move the entire front line forward. Surround them completely." The fleet responded at once. Thousands of ships adjusted position until the human vessel was enclosed in a perfect circle of glowing metal giants. There was no escape now. If the commander gave the order, the human ship would vanish into dust. The human's voice came again, calm and clear. "If this is your test, then we've already passed. Because we didn't come to win. We came to be heard." The commander stared at the little ship on the screen, his chest heavy. How could one person face so much power and not tremble? Was this bravery or foolishness? He couldn't tell. But he knew one thing for sure. This human believed every word they spoke. He gave a small gesture to his officers. "Activate the visual link." The screen lit up again, showing the human sitting in a small cabin surrounded by soft blue light from the ship's controls. The human looked tired but not afraid. The commander spoke, his tone cold but curious. "You risk your life for words. You think we will stop because you ask us to?" The human looked directly at him. "No, I don't expect you to stop because I ask. I only hope you listen." "Why should I listen?" the commander asked. "Because one day even you will need someone to listen to you." The commander froze. The room around him went still. The human had spoken a truth that pierced through the armor of his pride. He remembered long ago when his own people had cried out for help from a dying world and no one listened. That memory had been buried deep under centuries of war, but now it surfaced again, sharp and painful. He broke the silence with a harsh tone. "You know nothing of me or my people." The human nodded slightly. "Maybe not. But I know what it means to lose, to be afraid, and still choose to stand for something." The commander's gaze hardened. "You call that strength?" "Yes," the human said quietly. "Because real strength is not about how many lives you can end, it's about how many you can protect." The words hung in the air. Every soldier in the command room felt them. Some looked down at their control panels, avoiding eye contact with their leader. The commander turned away, trying to hide the storm of emotion rising inside him. He walked toward the window again, watching the stars beyond the glass. For years he had looked at those same stars as trophies of victory, symbols of conquest. But now for the first time they looked different, cold, distant, and empty. He gave one last order. "Disengage. Pull the fighters back." The crew hesitated. "Commander?" "Pull them back," he repeated firmly. The 3 Dreven fighters moved away from the human ship and returned to formation. The Armada's lights dimmed slightly as weapons powered down. The human's voice came through once more. "Thank you for listening." The commander didn't reply. He stood there in silence, watching the tiny ship glow softly against the darkness. Something about that ship felt almost alive, as if it carried not just one person but the spirit of an entire world. When the communication ended, the commander sat down slowly. His officers waited for new orders, but none came. After a long silence, he spoke quietly, more to himself than to anyone else. "Why are the humans only one ship against us?" No one answered, but in his heart, he felt the beginning of the truth. They didn't come with numbers. They didn't come with power. They came with belief. And belief, he realized, was a weapon that couldn't be scanned, measured, or destroyed. Outside, the stars shimmered like tiny eyes watching the scene unfold. The human ship remained still, its faint blue light pulsing softly as if it were breathing. The commander knew this encounter would not end here. Something had changed, not in the humans, but in him and his people. He looked again at the ship and whispered, "They face us without fear. Maybe that is the strength we've forgotten." That night, as the fleet drifted quietly in orbit, the commander could not sleep. The human's words played in his mind over and over again. He had tested them with the full power of his fleet, and they hadn't flinched. They had faced him with nothing but truth, and somehow that truth felt heavier than any weapon he had ever held. The next morning, the Dreven commander stood alone in his private chamber, staring out at the endless stars. The silence of space had never felt this heavy before. Normally, he found peace in it, the quiet after victory, the calm that followed domination. But now, that silence felt like a question he could not answer. He kept thinking about the human ship, the single, fragile vessel that stood against thousands of his warships. It was still there, unmoving, surrounded by the massive Dreven armada. He had ordered his fleet to hold position. No attacks, no contact, just watch. Yet the more he watched, the more restless he became. There was something about that ship, something that disturbed him. It wasn't power or size or technology, it was presence. Even without firing a single shot, that ship had shaken his fleet in a way no army ever could. His officers were quieter than usual, their confidence dimmed. They didn't speak of victory anymore. They spoke of the human, softly, cautiously, as if that one being had become a mystery they couldn't solve. As the commander stood lost in thought, his second officer entered the room. "Commander, the human ship remains in the same position," he said. "They have not moved, not transmitted any new message." The commander nodded slowly. "They wait. For what?" the officer asked. "For us," the commander said quietly. The officer frowned. "Commander, with respect, this is pointless. We have no reason to fear them. Their ship is weak. Our power is unmatched. Why waste time on this?" The commander turned his head slightly, his gaze sharp. "Power is not what troubles me. It is what I don't understand. Why would they come here alone? Why not send an army? Why not run when we surrounded them?" The officer looked down, unsure how to answer. The commander continued, his voice lower now, almost thoughtful. "They said something yesterday, that real strength is protecting, not destroying. Those words, they linger." The officer didn't respond. The commander could tell that he didn't understand. Perhaps none of them did yet. But the commander couldn't shake the feeling that there was a deeper meaning to all this, something he was meant to learn. He gave a short order. Prepare a small craft. I'm going there myself. The officer's eyes widened. You're going to the human ship? That's dangerous. The commander smiled faintly, though it wasn't the kind of smile one gives in comfort. It was tired, heavy, yet certain. If they meant harm, they would have shown it already. I need to see who they are with my own eyes. Within an hour, his transport was ready. The small craft detached from the flagship and glided across the dark space, heading toward the human vessel. Thousands of alien eyes watched from their ships as the commander crossed the distance that separated two worlds. When his craft reached the human ship, a message came through. Permission to dock granted, the human voice said simply. The airlock opened with a quiet hiss and the commander stepped inside. The human ship was smaller than he expected, almost fragile. The walls were plain, the lights soft. Everything felt warm, alive, very unlike the cold metal halls of his warships. At the center of the ship stood the human. They looked exactly as they had on the screen, calm, tired, but peaceful. When they saw the commander, they nodded. You came. I came to understand, the commander said. The human smiled slightly. Then we already share something in common. The commander studied them for a moment. Your ship is unarmed. You came alone. You must have known this could mean your death. Why risk so much for words? The human looked out the window, where the giant alien fleet shimmered in the distance. Because silence between worlds is more dangerous than war. Someone had to speak first. The commander frowned. You speak as though you know us. I don't know your kind, the human said softly. But I understand fear. I understand loss. You've built your strength on control because once you were afraid of losing it. The commander stiffened. The human's words cut deeper than expected. You know nothing about my people's history. The human met his gaze. Then tell me. For a long moment, the commander said nothing. Then he spoke, his voice quieter than ever before. Our homeworld was dying. We fought each other for survival until there was nothing left but ruin. When we finally left, we swore never to be weak again. We built ships, weapons, fleets. We conquered so that no one could ever conquer us. And in doing so, we forgot what we were fighting for. The human listened without interrupting. When the commander finished, they said, You didn't forget. You just buried it. The commander looked at them, his expression unreadable. You speak of things you can't possibly understand. The human stepped closer. Then help me understand. Help me see your truth. Because maybe then you'll see ours too. There was something sincere in their tone, something that disarmed him completely. He had faced rebels, soldiers, assassins, but never anyone like this. There was no hatred in their eyes, no fear, only compassion. The commander sighed, the weight of centuries pressing on his shoulders. If what you say is true, then what is it you want from us? Forgiveness? Friendship? The humans shook their head. Neither. We only want a future where we don't destroy each other before we have the chance to know one another. For the first time, the commander felt something unfamiliar stirring within him, hope. It was fragile, like the light of a distant star, but it was real. He turned toward the window again, watching his massive fleet floating outside. My people won't understand, he said quietly. They'll see your message as weakness. Then show them it isn't, the human said gently. Show them that listening is strength. The commander stood in silence. The human's words echoed through him, louder than any command he had ever given. For so long, his people had believed that peace was surrender, that mercy was failure. But maybe, just maybe, they had been wrong all along. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than before. Perhaps it's time to unlearn what we were taught. The humans smiled, their eyes full of quiet understanding. Every great civilization must do that at least once. The commander turned to leave, but before he did, he said, Your courage is rare. You've come here alone, yet you've moved an entire armada without a single weapon. I don't understand it, but I respect it. As he returned to his craft and flew back toward his flagship, the commander felt as though he were carrying something invisible, yet powerful. Not data, not a strategy, but a seed, an idea that could change everything. When he entered the command bridge again, the crew rose to attention. He looked around at their expectant faces and said, Stand down from battle status. The room filled with whispers. Commander, does this mean? It means, he interrupted, that today we do not fight. The officers exchanged glances, confused but obedient. The commander continued, The human ship will leave in peace. No one will harm them. They have something to teach us whether we are ready to learn or not. The second officer looked stunned. But Commander, our laws, our traditions. Traditions change, the commander said firmly. They must, or we will destroy ourselves. The officer fell silent. No one dared to argue. The commander walked to the window and watched as the human ship turned slowly, preparing to leave. It moved with quiet grace, its engines glowing faintly against the blackness. As it drifted away, the commander felt something shift deep inside him. For the first time in many years, he didn't see humans as enemies or threats. He saw them as mirrors, reflecting both what his people had become and what they could still be. When the ship disappeared into the stars, he whispered almost to himself, "Why are the humans only one ship against us? Maybe because one truth doesn't need an army." His words carried across the bridge, and though his crew didn't respond, they felt the meaning settle in their hearts. The war that had seemed so certain now felt uncertain. The hatred that had fueled their conquest felt smaller, weaker. The humans' courage had reached them, not through power, but through understanding. And as the stars glimmered in the vast darkness, the commander knew that something in the universe had quietly changed forever. Days turned into weeks after the human ship disappeared into the endless stars. The great Drevan fleet, once proud and restless, drifted in a strange silence. No wars, no raids, no new conquests, only the memory of a single meeting that had shaken the heart of an empire. The commander sat in his chamber often, watching the galaxy through the wide glass window. Before that encounter, he used to see stars as points to be conquered, each one a mark of victory waiting to be claimed. Now he saw them differently. Each light seemed alive, like a story, like a heartbeat from a world he had never known. For the first time, he wondered how many of those stars might hold people who feared his fleet, just as the humans once had. His officers still waited for new orders, but he gave none. Every plan of attack felt meaningless now. Every strategy that once brought pride now tasted hollow. What good was power, he thought, if all it brought was silence and ashes? One morning, his second officer entered and said, "Commander, the council requests your presence. They want to know why we still hold position." The soldiers grow restless. The commander stood up slowly. "Then let them hear the truth," he said. The council chamber was vast, filled with the highest-ranking Drevan leaders from across the galaxy. They were proud beings, strong and sharp-eyed, born to rule and to fight. As the commander entered, all eyes turned toward him. The High Counselor spoke first, his voice cold and commanding. "Commander, you led our fleet into human space, yet you returned without victory, without battle, and without reason. Explain yourself." The commander stepped forward calmly, because victory was not needed. The room fell silent for a moment, then filled with low whispers of confusion and anger. The counselor's tone sharpened. "Not needed? Are you suggesting weakness?" "No," the commander said firmly. "I am suggesting wisdom." He paused, letting the words settle. "We faced a single human ship, one vessel, unarmed, fragile, yet it stood before us with no fear. It carried no army, no weapons, and still it did not surrender. Do you know why?" No one answered. The commander continued, "Because they didn't come to fight. They came to speak, to offer peace, and in that moment their courage outweighed our power." The chamber filled with murmurs again. Some of the leaders looked uneasy, others looked angry. The counselor slammed his hand on the table. "Peace? You dare bring such weakness into this room? The humans are nothing compared to us." The commander met his eyes. Then why did one of them make an entire armada stop? That question cut through the noise. Even the counselor hesitated. The commander stepped closer. "We could have destroyed them easily. Yet we didn't. Not because of their weapons, but because of their words. They made us question what we've become." He turned slowly, facing the entire room. "Our people left a dying world behind, seeking survival. But in trying to survive, we lost our purpose. We conquered until there was nothing left to conquer. We feared weakness so much that we forgot what strength truly means." His voice grew softer yet stronger in feeling. "The humans reminded me that real strength is not in domination, it is in restraint. It is in protecting life, not crushing it." The chamber was silent now. Every leader listened, though many refused to meet his gaze. The commander continued, "When I looked into that human's eyes, I didn't see fear. I saw belief. They came alone, knowing we could destroy them, yet they still stood for peace. That kind of courage can't be measured in numbers or ships." One of the younger council members finally spoke. And what would you have us do, Commander? Abandon our fleets? Let the galaxy see us as weak? The commander shook his head. No, I want us to become something greater than feared. I want us to be respected. I want our children to grow under stars that don't burn from war. A heavy silence filled the room. The older members of the council exchanged dark looks. Some were clearly against him, but a few, just a few, seemed to understand. Finally, the High Counselor spoke again. You have changed, Commander. You speak like a dreamer. Our people don't survive on dreams. They survive on power. Power fades, the commander said quietly. Belief does not. The council dismissed him soon after, but as he left the chamber, the commander saw something new in the faces around him. Doubt. The old belief in endless conquest was cracking. Seeds of thought had been planted, and even the hardest stone could not stop them from growing forever. That night, alone in his quarters, he opened the old data files from the human transmission. The simple words the human had spoken played again, filling the room. If you destroy us, you destroy the chance to understand what you could become. The voice echoed softly in the dim light. The commander closed his eyes and thought of that tiny ship, floating bravely among giants, a single light against the darkness, and somehow it had changed everything. Over the next few months, the commander began making small changes. He ordered that certain border colonies be rebuilt instead of abandoned. He stopped raids on weaker worlds. Slowly, other officers began to follow his example. Some out of respect, others out of curiosity. A few simply wanted to see where this strange path would lead. Word spread across the fleet. The humans, those fragile beings, had somehow moved the heart of the great Dreven commander. Stories were told quietly in the barracks and training halls. Some mocked it. Others admired it. But no one could ignore it. Meanwhile, far across the galaxy, the human ship that had started it all had returned home. The pilot sent one final message into deep space, not knowing if anyone would ever hear it again. It said, "We did not fight them, yet we were not defeated. We showed them what it means to stand for peace. Maybe one day they will understand." That message traveled across the stars, faint but steady, and in time it reached the commander's ship. When he heard it, he smiled, a small, honest smile that felt strange after so long. "We already have," he whispered. Months later, something unexpected happened. A small group of Dreven ships arrived near Earth, not for battle, but to send a signal. It was a simple pulse repeated 3 times, a universal sign for peace. On Earth, scientists and leaders watched in disbelief. The signal was translated and decoded. It contained only a short message. "We remember your words." It was the beginning of something new, a fragile connection between 2 worlds that had once been ready to destroy each other. Back on his flagship, the commander watched the reports come in. The humans had received the message. They had replied. It was simple, written in glowing blue letters across the holographic screen. "We never stopped believing." The commander stood there for a long time, staring at those words. His fleet was no longer feared the same way it used to be. Many still called him foolish. Some even called him weak. But he no longer cared. He thought of that small human ship, the single vessel that had faced his entire armada and changed everything. That ship had been a mirror, showing him what courage looked like when stripped of all power. Now, as his ship drifted among the quiet stars, the commander whispered softly to himself, "Why are the humans only one ship against us? Because one truth spoken with courage can face 1,000 armies." He looked out once more at the galaxy. Vast, endless, alive. And for the first time in his life, he didn't feel alone among the stars. The wars would end one day, he believed. Maybe not soon. Maybe not in his lifetime. But someday the galaxy would remember not the battles that destroyed worlds, but the moment when one human ship, small and unarmed, taught an empire that peace was stronger than fear. And as his fleet moved quietly toward a new horizon, the commander knew the universe had begun to change, because one voice, one ship, and one act of courage had been enough to start it.